We are going to begin our study around the year 1500 because this period marks a crucial turning point in European history. It sets the stage for the religious conflicts that will shape European politics for centuries to come. To understand these later developments, especially the most significant one, the Protestant Reformation, we need to begin by examining European society at the start of the 16th century. Around 1500, Europe's population was beginning to rise again, though this growth would not remain steady. Population levels would fall during the 17th century, rebound in the 18th, and only by the mid-1700s would Europe experience the sustained population growth that we recognize today. For perspective, Europe's population in 1700 is estimated at roughly 114 million. Today, it exceeds 500 million. Although statistics from this period are only estimates, we can get a general sense of how people were distributed across the continent. The lands we now refer to as Germany likely held about 18 million inhabitants, followed by France with roughly 16 million, Italy with 12 million, Spain with 8 million, and Britain with around 4 million. However, sheer population size mattered less in 1500 than population density. Regions with the highest density tended to be the wealthiest. Northern Italian cities, the Rhine River Valley, and the Netherlands, areas with concentrated urban populations and vibrant economies, were among the richest parts of Europe. In contrast, sparsely populated regions such as Poland and Russia were among the poorest. Despite the presence of several major cities, Europe remained overwhelmingly rural. The largest city in 1500 was Naples, with about 200,000 inhabitants. Other major cities included Venice and Milan, with 115,000 and 100,000 respectively. London probably had around 70,000 people, Paris perhaps 90,000, Amsterdam only 15,000, and Berlin was little more than a village. These numbers show that roughly 85% of people in Western Europe, and up to 95% in Eastern Europe, lived in rural areas. Vast stretches of forest, marsh, and undeveloped land remained uninhabited. Most people rarely travelled beyond a 15-mile radius of their birthplace. Daily life was harsh by modern standards. Bread, primarily made from wheat, formed the core of the European diet before the widespread adoption of the potato. Household budgets reflect this. For example, in Berlin as late as 1800, about 44% of a mason's family income went solely to bread. Clothing accounted for 6.1, fuel for 6.8, lodging for 14, and other foods for 28. Bread was not just food, it was the foundation of the household economy. Economically and socially, Europe in 1500 was still rooted in agriculture. 9 out of 10 people earned their living from the land, usually in small villages and under obligations to a local lord. Society was legally divided into 3 estates or classes, each with its own rights and duties under the law. The first estate was the clergy, the class that prayed. In 1500, virtually all Western Europeans were Roman Catholic, so references to the Church meant the Catholic Church. The clergy formed a legally distinct estate because their members enjoyed privileges unavailable to the rest of society. Yet within the clergy, differences in wealth were enormous. Bishops and archbishops controlled large estates and possessed great wealth, while parish priests often lived in poverty comparable to the peasants they served. The second estate was the nobility, the class that fought. Emerging from medieval warrior elites, nobles were originally companions of kings and lords, rewarded for military service with land and titles. They were the knights who fought on horseback. By 1500, however, this military role was declining. New armies equipped with bows, pikes, and early firearms were cheaper to raise and more effective than armoured knights. The invention of gunpowder in the 14th century hastened the decline of mounted knights as a dominant force. Even so, the nobility still owned much of Europe's land, which continued to give them considerable economic and political power. As with the clergy, some nobles were extremely wealthy, while others had little. The third estate included everyone else, primarily the peasants, the class that worked. These were the people who laboured in the soil and whose efforts supported the other 2 estates. Though no peasant was wealthy, there were important differences in legal status. Some peasants were essentially free farmers who paid modest rent, others were semi-free, with greater obligations but some rights, and others were serfs, legally bound to the land. Serfs were not slaves, but they lacked freedom of movement and could not leave without permission. Within the Third Estate, however, a new class was emerging: the bourgeoisie, or middle class, centered in towns. Legally, they belonged to the peasantry because they were neither nobles nor clergy, but in practice they were developing their own identity, customs, and influence. As merchants, bankers, artisans, innkeepers, and manufacturers, they were positioned to benefit from Europe's expanding trade networks. By 1500, the European economy was beginning to shift. Traditional industries such as spinning, weaving, and ironworking persisted, but new industries were forming: printing, silk production, and weapons manufacturing among them. Commerce was expanding rapidly, fueled in part by exploration. In 1492, Columbus crossed the Atlantic, and in 1498, Vasco da Gama sailed around the southern tip of Africa to India, opening the way to the lucrative spice trade. The growing global exchange of products and wealth accelerated economic development throughout Europe. The bourgeoisie, already active in trade and manufacturing, were poised to take advantage of this new economic world. Many elements of the modern economy — capitalism, industrial production, printing, gunsmithing with standardized parts, modern banking practices, business cycles of inflation and depression, and even early forms of labor strikes — began to take shape around this time. By 1500, the foundations of Europe's transformation were already in place.